Me and my partner recently broke up. He ended the relationship with me. I recently found out I was pregnant and told him. He was angry and he went from being nice to hostile over this and pushed me to have an abortion. After consideration, I went for an abortion. I was disappointed he left me to go through this alone. Although things had been acrimonious through the breakup, I genuinely believed we cared for each other as friends, etc. I went through the abortion alone as he said he didn't want to know what I did/wasn't bothered. He also knew I hadn't and wouldn't confide in anyone around me avoid this because my family are very old-fashioned and conservative and I don't have many good friends. So the other night, I passed out and had a hemorrhage and was hospitalized alone. I phoned him to ask if he'd bring me some stuff to the hospital as I hadn't told anyone else. He didn't answer. The next day he called back and I told him what it was, and he was somewhat sympathetic, largely because I think he was relieved I'd had an abortion, but just apologized for what I was going through. He sent a few follow-up messages to ask how I was doing, but that was it. I also informed him that I have an operation later this week, which he'll know I'm very apprehensive for, and I didn't ask, but perhaps at least expected him to offer to come and visit me/help me out as he knows I'm going through it alone. I don't want to get back together, etc. I think I just felt disappointed on a human level that he couldn't support me a bit more. Also felt disappointed as it felt like a joint issue, and by virtue of being a woman, I'm left with the problem and zero support. He said on the phone the other day how much he cares still and how he wants to be friends, but it feels like a very poor way to start a foundation of friendship. I'd hoped we could have set aside the relationship and moved forward with a friendship which was built on genuine care. So am I bad for being disappointed in this person? Especially because if reversed, I would always show up for him as a friend. My ex is my boss. I work from home for a small company. There are only 8 employees, and we all work together on the same support team. My ex is my boss's boss, which means he's my boss as well. He and I dated for about 6 to 7 months, ending with an ugly breakup in March 2024. I have absolutely zero attraction to him or interest in ever dating him again. I would never date him again, no matter what. He's not a good person. Anywho, my current boyfriend, whom I truly love and hope to marry someday, has a big problem with my ex and I communicating. My ex is blocked in my cell phone, so he can't contact me personally, but he can contact me at work on Microsoft Teams. For the most part, the messaging on Teams is work-related. But occasionally he messages me something that isn't about work, like when his father died in February and he was expressing some of his grief and then asked me to proofread his eulogy. For the most part, I ignore things he says that aren't work-related, or I'll give one-word responses to show that I don't have interest in engaging in a conversation. I've told my ex twice that I want our conversations to be only work-related, but he apparently forgets that sometimes. I have to maintain some sort of balance here to where I don't get fired. This ex has retaliated on me before and made work hard for me, and intentionally made me look bad, and to where I don't lose my relationship. I know the content of the conversations that we have, and there's nothing at all flirtatious. No part of the conversations could be considered cheating. I am not a cheater, and I am in love with my boyfriend. Boyfriend feels that me engaging in personal conversation with my ex is disrespectful to him, and feels hurt by it. I've tried explaining to him that I can't be a full-on jerk to my ex since he's my boss, but what I do is keep it as minimal as possible by barely responding or ignoring it completely. There have been a few times where I respond a little bit more, but that's very rare, and the content isn't inappropriate. Help, please. I don't want my boyfriend's feelings to be hurt, but I also feel I am very limited on what I can do here, so I don't lose my job. This job is my only option right now, so I can't just quit to get away from the ex. I don't communicate with any other exes at all. Ada for getting mad. Ada for getting mad when my man gives me the 3rd degree for sleeping so much during the day. He says I disappear from texting him for 2 hours at the same time every Monday and Tuesday, or Monday through Wednesday. I forget what he said. Of course I hadn't noticed a pattern. I just notice when I need to nap, I take one. Or when I want to watch TV or scroll the internet, I don't pay much attention to texts. Never have. Some context info. I was still talking to my exes and hanging around other guys when we first started dating 5 years ago. We were both on drugs and got off drugs together not long after that. Fast forward, we have a wonderful life living paycheck to paycheck for right now and have a toddler together, plus he has 2 older sons, almost teenaged. I do everything with our toddler. I do all the cleaning, make sure he has clean clothes every day, and I do all the grocery shopping because I love going in stores, but it's harder with a toddler. By the time he has his shoes on, the times he's home when I get back from the store, I've almost always got all the groceries carried in, and I put them all away every time. He does work a desk job fixing electronics 40 hours a week, leaves at 7:30 a.m. and gets home around 5. I work from home 7 to 10 hours a week, often some of that time while at home by myself with our kiddo, who is very well behaved, almost 4, and I stop working if she needs something. Anyway, if I'm at the store too long, especially without answering his texts, or if I don't text back for a while, anytime, he always thinks something is up, and I'm a loyal woman. My patience is wearing thin on the same heated conversations all the time, and I feel like he's always mad at me for something. When he's not, I'm just waiting for the next argument. Yes, I have my flaws. I can be a little self-centered, which I'm trying to work on, and I lay around a whole lot when I'm not busy doing everything that needs to be done. I don't always communicate well with him, and we often have tension about simple things like where to eat or whether I'm going to work, because sometimes I blow it off because I can. He works super hard and hates his working environment. It's toxic. He's thoughtful and loving and takes care of everything I can't. I'm not asking for advice to leave him. I'm just asking if I'm the AH, and if so, how can I make our interactions better? Am I being too self-centered now? This is my first Ada post, so I hope I outlined it right. Ada for ghosting my friend after weird behavior? My not-so-much friend anymore, 26F, and I, 21F, have been friends/neighbors for a little over a year. We were actually starting to get really close. Though we didn't have much in common, we trauma bonded a lot. Things were going fairly smooth. We would do small kind gestures for each other all the time, such as invite them over for dinner, vice versa, and gifting just because. We spent a lot of quality time together because both our mans work while we are stay-at-home GF/wife. One thing I did notice about her was she tends to create unnecessary drama with her family, not to mention an big attitude problem. She does tend to overthink, and a lot of arguments within her family were caused by that. I didn't really put in too much input when she ranted, and because it wasn't my business or my say, I just sat back and listened, until it became part of her everyday life. She constantly has a problem with someone about something, whether it be her family, her boyfriend, even workers at public places. For example, she raised hell and never let her mom hear the end of it because she went to Walmart without her early in the morning while she was still sleeping. She says it was inconsiderate of them to not ask if she at least needed anything. Sometimes these weren't even simple arguments. Many times it's turned into full-on screaming matches. Again, not my family's drama, so I stayed out of it. A few months ago, I noticed she started to nonchalantly give me attitude sometimes. I just figured she was in a bad mood and some things were happening with her family again, so I let it go. A week or so goes by, and I find out I'm pregnant with my first child. My husband and I are very excited as this will be the first grandchild on both sides of our family. Our time has mostly been dedicated to each other, our family, appointments, and getting ready for the baby to arrive. While I was in the first trimester, and just now entering my second, I was puking almost all day, trying so hard with everything in me to keep food/water down. It was so hard for me to do much of anything, let alone get up out of bed to use the bathroom. I spent most of my time to myself watching shows/movies and playing Minecraft while my husband worked. I tried to stay off of social media during this time as it was draining with all of the presidential things happening. People constantly arguing back and forth. Just wanted to stay away from it all and focus on my health. During this time, I started to notice she would message me on Snapchat, and if I didn't answer within 20 minutes or so, she would delete the message. It became so often it was almost every day. I usually responded with a, because that was my genuine reaction. I didn't understand it. She would come up with an excuse saying, "Oh, I'm sorry I wrote out a whole paragraph, but then I realized it didn't really matter. Anyways, how'd you day?" She used this excuse a lot. It was either that or, "I didn't do that. Snapchat did," which yes, Snapchat messages erase if you don't save them or have a 24H timer on them. But they definitely don't say said person has deleted a chat. Again, something else I just let go. One day I even asked if I did something wrong and she responded with, "Well, do you feel like you did something wrong?" I said, no, I don't think LOL. And she responded with, "Okay, well then you didn't do anything wrong." Thought that was really weird. One day during my first trimester was the absolute worst. Puking legit nonstop the whole day, crying, couldn't even pick up the phone when family would call me. Sadly, my husband was at work this day, so I was all on my own. The day after, I get a Snapchat from her saying, "I'm not going to try and keep this Snapchat streak going by myself because this is a two-way friendship, not a one-way friendship." She seemed extremely offended I went one day without my phone. Snapchat streaks aren't important to me because I'm not in middle school anymore. That comment alone made me extremely upset, especially because she knew how sick I've been. I sent a blank picture back, and that was that. I didn't give her any explanation because I was already pretty annoyed, so I had the thought in my mind, well, she doesn't deserve an explanation if she's going to outright give me attitude like she's been doing. She knows what I'm going through. We haven't spoken since. It's been almost a month. Last week I found out she unadded me as a friend on everything. Her boyfriend and I husband are still fairly close, but whenever he comes to our place it's kinda awkward considering the situation has never been brought up between him and I. I'm just so confused on how something so simple as a Snapchat streak could ruin a good friendship. Ada for not giving her an explanation or reaching out. Sorry, I know this is kinda long, and there's still lots of details I'm leaving out because this would unfortunately be a book. Hello, I'm F17, my son who is M5M, and his father is M18. I cannot explain that crap I get from this family. Since I was pregnant, my baby daddy father threatened to hurt me if I don't properly do the dishes. They kicked me out the house multiple times if I didn't do anything right. But fast forward to after I was pregnant. I've posted about this story before, but my ex-mother-in-law took my son without my permission and didn't come back home into 12 a.m. So that was 4 hours my kid was missing. Yes, I did call the police, and they did nothing. That was I called final strike and let them stop seeing my son. Then my kid's father became a deadbeat and neglectful. He would send him to his parents who, let me note, are on hardcore drugs. He brings him to a crack house, a weed house while I was at work. That's when I told his aunt to do supervised visitation so Daniel can still see his father. I blowed both of their phones up for 6 hours until I got in contact with them because I couldn't leave my work, so I couldn't even go. Then when I did, I got cussed out. I have been receiving threats from a family member of the family. That's when I stopped forcing myself to get along with my son's father and just started caring for my kid. Now I get threats and hateful messages from the family, text now messages. So Ada? Or should I rekindle? AITA for not helping my sister get her security deposit back from her apartment. I, 28F, always known my sister, 27F, to be a messy person. Our entire lives, she always struggled to keep her room clean, and when we rented our first apartment together, I had to do 90% of all of the cleaning. I've always chalked it up to her ADHD, and I've always been fairly patient with her, at least more patient than others who I've expressed my frustrations to say they'd be if they had to always clean up after a sibling of nearly the same age. She just moved across the country with her fiancé, and is currently there setting up their new home. They couldn't take all of their things with them, and I was asked to help grab a few things out, mainly large furniture, and clean up a little. I've never been to the apartment she just moved out of until yesterday. The last apartment of hers that I went into was the day before she was scheduled to move to help pack a few items, and she had not packed a single thing. We had to pack and clean an entire apartment in basically 24 hours. By some miracle and a ton of scrubbing, she got that security deposit back. It's been 5 years since I had last helped her move, and I had really thought that at almost 30 years old she'd have changed her ways. I went into that apartment with a few really amazing friends, my parents, and my sister's fiancé's parents, and I was so embarrassed I tried to prevent my friends from entering the apartment. I wanted to cry. There was so much stuff that I couldn't even tell what she took with her. There were dirty dishes in the sink and dirty laundry in the bedroom floor. Pet urine was soaked into the bedroom carpet, and the hardwood floor in the living room was so deeply scratched it was unsalvageable. The dog had broken all of the blinds. Stuff was so dusty and covered in fur I don't think it had ever been dusted since she moved in 5 years ago. I was so upset I told everyone that we should grab her items to take to the storage unit we rented for her, and that's it. Let her live with the embarrassment of having her landlord see how she ruined this apartment. My parents and my sister's fiancé's mom couldn't stand it to not do anything about the mess and smell, and they spent the day doing their best to clean the apartment while I, my friends, and the fiancé's dad just moved furniture and threw stuff in boxes. Not particularly neatly or carefully, I admit, but I was really angry and left. I know that my parents couldn't get everything cleaned up very well, because they're older and you definitely needed more than 3 people cleaning to do half of what was needed to be done. I know I could have done more and that I left them to deal with my sister's mess when we had more hands to help, and I took over half of the crew with me when I left after grabbing her stuff and loading it into the U-Haul to go to storage. They're going to collect their stuff in a few months to go to their new place. There's zero way they managed to clean that apartment enough to get my sister her deposit back, and frankly the damage is way beyond what will be covered with it, because at a minimum it needs new hardwood, carpet, blinds, and probably repaint it. AITA for choosing to not help my sister get her deposit back and refusing to do more than the bare minimum for her cross-country move. Ada for hating my partner's dogs. For context, my partner, let's call them B, and I have been together for 15 years. We have 2 kids together, and for a great portion of our relationship, they, my partner, had a small dog named Sunny. B's an animal lover, the type who would keep an elephant or a tiger as pets if they could. I'm the exact opposite. I don't hate them or anything, but I'm not the type to go out of my way to adopt one and bring it home. Still, since they love dogs and Sunny was very calm and easy to manage, we never had any issues over her. But around 2 years ago, Sunny passed away of old age, and needless to say, that crushed B. I knew they wouldn't be able to live without a pet in the house, and seeing how distraught they were, I agreed that they could take another dog as long as it fit certain conditions. 1. That it didn't grow too much, because we live in a relatively small apartment and have kids. 2. That they would be responsible for it just as they were with Sunny, taking it on walks, buying its food, cleaning its mess, etc. B agreed to it, and showed up a few days later with a puppy. Looking at it, I immediately hesitated, because even then it seemed almost as big as Sunny had been when she died. I asked B if they were sure the puppy wouldn't get too big, and they said they guaranteed it. A month passed. The puppy, X, grew exponentially then, and B showed up with another one. This time the argument was that X needed company, and Y, the new puppy, needed a home because the shelter it was in was too awful. Again, I worried about their size because X was getting bigger by the day and Y was the same size. B reassured me and said dogs grew a lot when they were young, but then stopped. Well, that had happened, but only when both X and Y reached 45 pounds each. I can't put into words how destructive these dogs are. They've eaten cables, shoes, clothes, papers, and furniture. If a neighbor farts on the elevator, they'll bark as if we're being invaded. I understand it's not their fault, that they're animals. Big ones at that. I know they need to spend energy somewhere, but me understanding it doesn't make it less frustrating. And every time I complain to B about it, they dismiss my complaints by saying, that's just how dogs are. They're not bad dogs, per se, but their constant barking and licking and sniffing overstimulates me to an unbearable degree. I understand that my partner loves pets and I try to respect and support it, but I feel they don't understand my perspective, and that this constant feeling of having to live around the dogs is making me unhappy. I've been losing my temper more often, and I can't help it. I just feel so overwhelmed all the time. They're so noisy, and I can't walk around my own house without tripping onto one of them. I can't leave my things whenever I want because they'll destroy it. And before anyone asks, why don't the kids take them on walks before we get home? We don't live in a safe city, and I don't want my kids walking around by themselves with a bunch of dogs that can drag them through the street. Am I the asshole here? AITA for responding the way I did to my boyfriend? Advice needed. My boyfriend 24M and I 25F had intercourse on Saturday, and he mentioned that he heard from his friends that giving oral helps with beard growth. Although I was always interested in oral, I had to let go of my needs and compromise since he wasn't into it. When I asked him if he would be willing to try it after his friend's comment, he did, but within 5 minutes, I could tell he was annoyed and trying to rush through it, so I asked him to stop. He typically prefers just intercourse and doesn't really engage much in foreplay or kissing. When I asked him to stop, he responded with something like, "Thank goodness, that felt like a long time." I was taken aback. I moved on by that comment, but eventually he said he was no longer in the mood because of the way I responded to that. I didn't argue and just went about my day. As I walked away, he mentioned he didn't want to make me uncomfortable, but asked me to let him know when I shaved next time because my ingrown hairs made his tongue bleed. I said, "Okay, I'm sorry. I'll tell you next time." I was really annoyed because this wasn't the first time he's complained about something after sex. Previously, he asked me to let him know if I wanted oral before he showers because he doesn't like to feel dirty or have any smell on him. I agreed, but it's been months since I asked for oral, and we've been together for a year. It seems like all we do is intercourse or to satisfy his needs, and never mine. He got upset I didn't say anything, but when I did he got upset and angry. I expressed that I felt like every time we have any type of physical contact, he always has something negative to say. It ruins the mood, and a lot of the things he mentions is basic sexual acts or childish things like complaining about a bit of ingrown hairs that is very normal. He acted very macho man, and said he knows it's normal, but he also acts extremely childish about it. I had to let go of a lot of my sexual needs just to still be with him and make him comfortable, and yet he still has something to say. It makes me not want to enjoy or want to have sex anymore. I feel frustrated because it seems like he always has something to say or asks me to change something to please him. A little bit of hair shouldn't ruin the mood, but his comments make me feel bad every time, and I end up feeling like I'm the one compromising. AITA for responding the way I did, or was I unreasonable?